Well, it's an incredible yet true story from our friends at creation.com, real scientists doing real science. On the 17th of December, 1832, Charles Darwin arrived at Tierra del Fuego at the southernmost tip of South America as part of his world tour aboard HMS Beagle. He got his first view of the native inhabitants, whom he described as, quote, miserable, degraded savages, unquote, a term he used many times in his journal concerning these people. He wrote, I could not have believed how wide was the difference between savage and civilized man. It is greater than between a wild and domesticated animal, inasmuch as in man there is a greater power for improvement. He described one group of Fuegians as the most abject and miserable creatures I anywhere beheld, and as existing in, quote, a lower state of improvement than any part of the world. These poor wretches were stunted in their growth, he said, their hideous faces bedaubed with white paint, their skins filthy and greasy, their hair entangled, their voices discordant, and their gestures violent. Viewing such men, one can hardly make oneself believe that they are fellow creatures and inhabitants of the same world. It is a common subject, he goes on to say, of conjecture what pleasure in life some of the lower animals can enjoy, how much more reasonably the same question may be asked with respect to these barbarians. At night, 5 or 6 human beings, naked and scarcely protected from the wind and rain of this tempestuous climate, sleep on wet ground, coiled up like animals. Concerning their painted faces, he wrote, with their naked bodies bedaubed with black, white, and red, they looked like so many demoniacs who had been fighting, and the party altogether closely resembled the devils which come on stage like in plays like Der Freischütz. Concerning their language, Darwin wrote, the language of these people, according to our notions, scarcely deserves to be called articulate. Captain James Cook has compared it to a man clearing his throat, but certainly no European ever cleared his throat with so many hoarse, guttural, and clicking sounds. Comparison with the views of Christopher Columbus, however, the people Darwin saw were in many ways similar to the native inhabitants whom Columbus had seen when he landed at San Salvador in the Bahamas, north of the South American continent, on the 12th of October, 1492. The natives of both Tierra del Fuego and the Bahamas were naked, or nearly so. Both decorated their bodies and faces with colored paints. Both traded trinkets with their visitors. Both communicated by gestures in an attempt to bridge the language barrier. And both imitated the gestures and speech of their visitors. However, Columbus, in his log, described the people he saw as being friendly and well-dispositioned, having handsome bodies and very fine faces with eyes that were very large and very pretty. He praised their docility. He is delighted at finding a group of people in need of salvation and wrote, I think they can easily be made Christians, for they seem to have no religion. Darwin, on the other hand, in obvious racist disparagement and disgust, compared his group to devils he had seen in plays and equated their habits to those of animals. Why the difference? Why was there such a difference in the way these two explorers described the people they saw? It was during this voyage of the Beagle that Darwin read Charles Lyell's newly published Principles of Geology, which subtly ridiculed belief in recent creation in favor of an old Earth, and denied a global flood in favor of slow and gradual geological processes. It also presented Darwin with a time frame of vast geological ages, which seemed to make his theory of natural selection as the mechanism of evolution plausible. And all of this was part of the commencement of his slippery slide into unbelief and rejection of Genesis, which blinded his eyes to the fact that all human beings, no matter how apparently uncivilized, are made in the image of God, and all are related through Adam. In fact, a few years later, in 1871, he wrote The Descent of Man, in which he repeatedly presents the racist view that primitive peoples stand between the animals and man, and in which case, he says, At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. So Darwin was advocating the extermination of the savages, including the people in Tierra del Fuego that he ran into. But the gospel did come to the Fuegians. In due course, missionaries came to Tierra del Fuego. The first was Allen Gardner, who from 1841 onward made several attempts to reach the Fuegians. In 1844, he formed a Patagonian Missionary Society, which was renamed the South American Missionary Society, or SAMS, in 1864. Gardner made 2 attempts to settle in Tierra del Fuego in 1845 and 1848, both of which were frustrated by the hostility of the natives, and again in 1850, this time with 6 companions, only for them all to die a year later from hunger and exposure to the awful cold of a sub-Antarctic winter. When a relief ship was 2 months late in arriving, that didn't help either. Another missionary was Thomas Bridges, who committed the language of the people, called Yagan, to writing and compiled a dictionary of 32,000 entries. Contrary to the erroneous and disparaging remarks of Charles Darwin, the oral forms of the language seem to have been unusually intricate and complicated. Bridges' dictionary included 50 different words for family relationships. Imagine that. A group of barbarians that Charles Darwin wanted to exterminate had 50 different words for family. When Bridges had translated the 4 Gospels and Acts and produced a prayer book, the mission was well on its way to fruitfulness and success. In 1862, the leader of a fresh missionary party was Wade Hawking Sterling. His doctors had warned him that he probably had only 3 years to live, to which he replied that he would live them where they would be most used of God. He served for the next 38 years in Tierra del Fuego, traveling throughout the region by horseback, bringing the gospel to the Yagan and to other Fuegian tribes. By 1869, over 400 Indians had believed and been baptized. Now, what was Darwin's reaction to all of this? Well, news of his changing lifestyle of the Fuegians reached Darwin in 1867. He was so impressed that he immediately sent off a check to SAMS. So Darwin starts funding this missionary group, and he continued to contribute to the society for the next 15 years until he died in 1882. Vice Admiral B.J. Sullivan wrote to the Daily News of 24 April 1885 about this, and he says, after referring to Charles Darwin as my old friend and shipmate for 5 years, he said, Mr. Darwin has often expressed to me his conviction that it was utterly useless to send missionaries to such a set of savages as the Fuegians, probably the very lowest of the human race, he said. I had always replied that I did not believe any human beings existed. This is Darwin's friend replying to Darwin, that he did not believe any human beings existed too low to comprehend the simple message of the gospel of Christ. After many years, he wrote to me that the recent accounts of the mission proved to him that he had been wrong. And I write in our estimates of the native character and the possibility of doing them good through missionaries. He requested to me to forward to the society an enclosed check of £5 as a testimony of the interest he took in their good work. The date of this payment was 9 February 1867. On June 30, 1860, Darwin wrote to B.J. Sullivan concerning the success of the Tierra del Fuego mission. Quote, "It is most wonderful," Darwin writes, "and shames me," he says, "as I always prophesied utter failure. As a grand success, I shall feel proud if your committee think fit to elect me an honorary member of your society." So Darwin requested, before he died, to join the SAMS Society, the Missionary Society. So isn't that an incredible story? Even Darwin was forced to admit that Christianity is a worldview that is functionally superior to all others.